Hello, and welcome to another episode of Monster Island Radio. I'm Ben, and I'm joined by...
Graham. Hello.
Hello. So, for starters, I'd like to apologise to, all two of our regular listeners about our absence lately.
Is that you and me then?
Yeah, basically. We're away certainly longer than either of us would have liked, but couldn't really be helped. But we're back today, and we're going to be talking about Godzilla 2014. So,
might that be somewhat topical?
It may be. This is the first entry into the Legendary MonsterVerse. So this is a bit out of order because our first episode was the sequel, King of the Monsters. So if you want to listen to this in film order, listen to this episode and then go back and listen to our first episode. Okay, so this came out 7 years ago. So let's refresh our memories.
Okay.
We kick off with a montage of archival footage of Godzilla being nuked at Bikini Atoll in 1954. So I feel like this film's already establishing that it's not a sequel to any of the Japanese films because, in 54, he was killed in Tokyo Bay with the oxygen destroyer.
They sort of tease you that, it looks like nuclear test footage, but as the montage goes on, it's revealed, they're actually trying to kill this thing.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They think in 1954 they killed him, and that's the end there. So then we flash forward to 1999 in the Philippines, where Dr. Ishiro Serizawa and Dr. Graham, who work for the secret organization Monarch, are investigating a giant fossilized skeleton and 2 eggs, one of which hatched, went into the sea, and then subsequently caused a nuclear meltdown at the Gojira nuclear power plant in Japan, where Joe Brody and his wife Sandra are working. So Joe survived the meltdown. Sandra perished, sadly. And
he holds himself responsible, doesn't he?
Well, does he?
Well, because he tells her to go down into the
I see, yeah.
The under bit of the plant, and then all this thing happens. So she dies, and he ultimately feels like it's kind of his fault kind of thing. So I think that's,
Okay, yeah. You know what? It's weird. I didn't actually really pick up on the sense of responsibility from him, to be honest. But maybe I probably just didn't notice, actually. But yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. He survived. And so over the course of the next 15 years, he just became obsessed with this, with what actually caused the meltdown, because he doesn't think it was a natural disaster. And then that ultimately leads him to being estranged from his son, Ford. Then obviously we learned that there was a cover-up because there was a giant chrysalis at the site of the meltdown. And it was still feeding off the radioactive energy there. Joe had predicted it, went to the site to prove it, after convincing Ford to come along with him. And then a giant creature called a MUTO emerges from the chrysalis and ends up killing Joe. Injures him and then he dies.
Yeah, sad times.
Yeah. And then we come back to Serizawa and Graham, who explain to Ford the history of Monarch's investigations into Godzilla and the MUTO discovery from the 90s. And this is where the film kind of rewrites history a bit. So it's saying that the atomic tests at Bikini Atoll, which we saw at the start, were actually nuclear attacks from the US to try and kill Godzilla. And that apparently the USS Nautilus, which is a nuclear sub, had awakened him. Seems to be like a nice tidy way of absolving the US from any wrongdoings in the nuclear arms race there, but I don't know. So Serizawa believes that Godzilla's there to restore balance and take out the MUTO, but the military disagree. That's that common little trope there. And then another MUTO ends up hatching in Nevada and is looking to reproduce with the other MUTO, so the military plan to lure all 3 kaijus into the ocean and nuke them. Doesn't quite work out like that. Godzilla ends up killing them and then returns to the ocean a hero. The end. Obviously there's more to it than that.
We'll get into all that.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the first Godzilla film made by a Western production company since 1998 with the one everyone knows, the Roland Emmerich Godzilla. So was the beginning of the new cinematic universe. Includes movies and comics and soon to be TV shows. We hear.
Oh.
Yeah. So this one is definitely jumping on the Marvel Cinematic Universe bandwagon. I mean, obviously Marvel wasn't the first to do this, but certainly popularized the way of doing it.
It's the modern iteration of like
Star Wars,
Universal Monsters, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So like, I mean, I don't mind bandwagoning as long as it benefits me as a viewer. I mean,
well, it's interesting if like with Godzilla, you can apply the Marvel, foundations quite easily.
Backtrack it, yeah, exactly.
With stuff like the Universal Monsters, they tried to do the dark verse or something, didn't they? Like with Tom Cruise in the Mummy movie, and that just like disintegrated because you can't even Ghostbusters is another one. You can't apply it to everything. But with Godzilla, it was a pretty good fit. And at first, I think when the movie first came out, was it said outright that it was going to be part of a universe, or did they let the movie come out and just sit and see how it did? Because I can't quite remember if we already knew before we saw it if it was going to be a new franchise per se. Obviously, there's always a chance that things will get a sequel, but
I know that after the premiere, it was like a couple of days after it got greenlit for 2 sequels straight away.
Right.
So whether that means that there was a universe in mind beforehand or not, I don't know.
Well, I'm sure that the studio had it in mind, but I don't know if it was known to the public until after it was a success, is what I mean. But I cannot remember at all. But it's not important.
I can't either. I think because, I mean, I don't think we saw it straight away. So by the time we saw it, it was probably already known to us that it was part of a cinematic universe. So, actually, did we watched this in the cinema together, didn't we?
No, we didn't.
Didn't we?
No.
Oh.
It wasn't until Skull Island came out that I started to clock on like, oh, this is going to be concurrent Marvel-esque universe.
Right.
So, but my memory's foggy of all these things. But
yeah. Well, even though we didn't watch it together, even though I thought we did, I think our thoughts kind of, they generally aligned on this film. So, I mean, remind me, 7 years ago when we first saw it, what did you make of it?
Well, I've seen it 3 or 4 times now. I rewatched it for this podcast, obviously, but when I first saw it in the cinema, my expectations were, it goes without saying, they're very high because the trailer was so strong. I mean, like people like Gareth Edwards, like very grounded style that was applied to Godzilla. The Halo drop trailer was like really, it really showed like how emphatic they were about taking it seriously, and ultimately, the movie has too little Godzilla in it, which is now pretty much famous for being like a good movie that falls short because of that. I think there's like maybe 6 or 8 minutes of Godzilla in the whole film.
I think it's actually 11.
Is it more?
Yeah.
It feels like so little.
Even so, for a 2-hour movie, to have only 10 minutes.
Yeah, he doesn't turn up until the midway point of a 2-hour movie. And so in the cinema, as you asked, I enjoyed it, but I did leave kind of disappointed because I felt like I hadn't seen enough Godzilla, and what was there was good. And it's the same thing as with King of the Monsters, where what we saw action-wise was really strong, but just not enough of it, or not cleanly presented. They do a thing in Godzilla 2014 where almost all the action is shown through a voyeuristic means, like through a window or on a TV set, or you see in the Halo drop through the first-person view of like Ford Brody's like gas mask, and that's great, but it just lacks a kind of. I just want to see it kind of, done in a more popcorny way, I suppose. So, on face value, I appreciate the movie's attempt to take Godzilla seriously, and before seeing the movie, I was very on board with that concept. But I think that taking it seriously and having an enjoyable Marvel-esque action sequence, shall we say, maybe doesn't go together quite so well. And when I watched it last night for this, I found myself I've enjoyed it less and less as I've rewatched it, basically. And last night I enjoyed it the least. I found myself to be actively bored by it now. I've truly seen it. And I think its rewatch value is spent. And it made me feel like I'd been a little bit too harsh on King of Monsters, actually, in retrospect.
I was wondering that, actually. I was hearing you say that. But I think, generally, I'm a little more positive on it than you are. But for the most part, I completely agree. And especially when you say, rewatching it again, it kind of gets worse each time. not worse, but less enjoyable, I suppose, because I felt exactly the same. And I think there's a certain point, I suppose, basically after Joe dies, Bryan Cranston's character, it hits a wall, and I found myself kind of switching off because, you know, the character I was following was gone at that point, and then it was just kind of this, I don't know, really Blair human interest story that had already peaked. I mean, they blew their load at the start with Joe and Sandra, and then they tried to sustain that but with far less interesting characters of Ellie and Ford, and that emotionless vessel of a child that you're supposed to care about for the next hour. And it's like, the thing is, I don't mind focusing on humans as long as they're interesting.
That's the thing, yeah. And there's something in there. It's not fully realised at a scripting stage, in my opinion.
I do think it was actually, getting rid of Bryan Cranston at the start, in the first half hour. It's like, that was the most interesting part. And that's the bit that really kind of hooks you in. You know, you hadn't really seen anything, for that first half an hour, but you're still engaged. And then, then when you do start to see something, it's just teases. It's lots of teasing. And then, but then you're still stuck with these characters you're not really interested in. Yeah.
I think the movie has a number of like directorial choices which don't really work for me. In a Godzilla sense, it deliberately mimics Spielbergian tropes, which we've commented on. The Japanese ones did that. The Millennium Era is slattered in Jurassic Park references.
Yeah.
And it seems like Gareth Edwards was deliberately kind of trying to do some Spielberg stuff. A lot of the Godzilla moments are seen through the eyes of a child, which is a very Spielbergian thing. But then if you think about like Tim and Lex in the original Jurassic Park, they are fully realised characters in the movies, and think what you will of those characters, but you're with them and you know their experiences, their emotional reactions count.
Yeah.
In Godzilla 2014, it has a habit of just cutting to just any random kid. There's three, basically. The kid on the beach, the girl, the Japanese boy on the train, and then Brody's own child all see Godzilla, but they all have very placid, unemotional reactions.
Yeah.
And they're not characters either, so you don't really care. And there's also the element of Jaws in this movie where Gareth Edwards seems to want to conceal Godzilla in an attempt to make him more frightening.
He said the same thing himself.
That's, And it's like, I'm not against that in principle. I don't even mind waiting a full hour to see Godzilla, because as long as the human element is strong, that's fine. But we all know Godzilla, it's like the xenomorph thing. It's like in the first Alien, if you don't know what a xenomorph looks like, it can be very frightening. And because that's an effective movie, it still holds up, as does Jaws. But the more you see something, like Godzilla, it's like, well, there's no point in really hiding it. Ultimately, you're there to see a character, and the character's Godzilla, and it just feels like he's barely in the film.
Yeah, definitely. It's a secondary character. The
other side of the coin on that, to me, I think, is that Bryan Cranston was in Godzilla, but then between filming it and it coming out, Breaking Bad goes supernova. It's the most popular thing in the world for a little space of time. And I think they did push the focus in the marketing, and somewhat of the editing at the start of the movie is made to look like he's the main character.
Mm.
And what you're saying is like, when Bryan Cranston dies, the movie, like, all the air goes out of it. If you think about his performance, he's angry, he's emotional, he's shouting, he's pushing the story forward. And like, Aaron Taylor-Johnson gets given like nothing to do at all as a character. He's just like a complete empty vessel. And he's not a bad actor at all.
No,
you just follow him through the movie, like you follow a stranger through an empty train station sort of thing. It's like
basically,
there's nothing. He just drags you through.
Yeah,
I was thinking this last night actually. His whole reason for being in the movie and the way he gets from point A to B is ultimately that he is a bomb disposal guy in the army. Yeah. By the end of the movie, he gets sent in through the halo drop to just what do they call it? Defuse the nuclear bomb, and then they say, "Oh, we can't defuse it." And they don't do it. It's just like, that's his whole purpose. The whole movie has been building up to the fact that he's going to defuse a bomb, and then he doesn't even do it. And then the movie's basically just over immediately after.
And I felt no tension with him trying to get from point A to point B either.
No, he's supposed to be very worried about his wife and family. And Elizabeth Olsen does a great job in this movie selling the fear.
Mm.
but you don't feel like they're really connected at all.
No,
really.
like they have that kind of one scene at the start where they're having some wine when he first gets back, and like they kind of have a little chuckle, and that's the only kind of flicker of chemistry you get between them.
They do have chemistry, don't they?
Yeah,
so
but
it's not the actor's fault at all, is it?
No. So, you know, age-old argument, humans were very uninteresting, and that was the focus of most of it. I mean, yeah. But I mean, I get it, going for the more grounded approach, so you obviously have to, follow human characters more, but, it is what it is, I suppose. I like how they've set up, Godzilla's origins, and, well, the origins of any of the Titans, or, well, not called Titans in this movie, but they are now. So, the fact that, these monsters roamed the Earth when, the radiation levels were higher on the surface, and then as it depleted after after a comet hit, they had to go down further into the Earth to get to the core, where radiation's higher. And then, I like how they expanded upon that in King of the Monsters with that underwater civilization and stuff like that. So that was really great to add that in. I think that's kind of opened the doorway for the rest of the MonsterVerse, really. And whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. But it's I like the way they did it. And then it kind of comes back around to this, the nuclear aspect. Like the reason they're back is because of bombs dropping. So it still ties into that Godzilla's nuclear origins. So it's I think even though that whole kind of bit was explained basically in one scene for like 5 minutes when Sarah was telling Ford about it, I think that added a lot to the lore of Godzilla and the MonsterVerse, and there's I really enjoyed that. But then we were back on, but then we didn't see Godzilla for another 20 minutes after that. So yeah,
watching the airport scene last night, the build up to Godzilla's reveal is so strong. It has the makings of a really great little 3-act fight scene, basically.
Yep.
But you only get the first part of it. It's like, here's the MUTO. The MUTO's attacking people. The planes are exploding. The foot's there. It's like, oh my God, like we're going to see Godzilla. And then, yeah.
This is the thing, like the fight scenes, or missing reels, as I like to call them, are basically like, they're all really effective. Like the build-up is always really effective. So like, the first glimpses of him, like when you first see him going underwater underneath the boat, and like the flares going by him and stuff like that. And like, so all the teasers are great, and I like the reveal as well when you actually see Godzilla in full for the first time. But like the first fight, just as they clash, it cuts away, and you see it as like a news broadcast instead on a tiny TV screen in the corner. And I get that it was kind of trying to be funny. It's like, oh, Ellie was unaware that it was happening, because she wasn't watching the TV at that point. And it's like, is it really worth cutting away from that for a little laugh? If that's what they were trying to do, I don't know.
Well, they should have given us a bit of the fight and then had the laugh as well. Why not both kind of situation?
Yeah.
The fight doesn't have to be huge, but like, let's see a couple of hits and something. Can Godzilla like pick up a little plane and smack this MUTO in the face?
Yeah.
Why not? But I guess that goes against the grounding aspect of it. But yeah, I mean, Godzilla as a horror movie is a very interesting concept. And of course, the reaction to this was Shin Godzilla on the Japanese side, which shows just how good that can actually be, right?
Yeah.
But Shin Godzilla isn't too concerned with absolute realism either.
No.
So, yeah, I think it's just that there's a preconception of the movie and the team who made it that's so like, this is what we're doing, and we're resolute, and this is, what we want, and they have achieved it effectively. But it's very emotionless. Like, even if Godzilla was still like not in it very much and the cuts were the same, I think like things like Ken Watanabe, right? Who's Serizawa. There's no real personality there either, and Monarch as an organization is very scheming and unpleasant and secretive and dangerous.
You're supposed to kind of sympathize with Serizawa, and I think you do, but it makes you wonder why he's working for this company that seems so, skeevy. That's
the thing. It's
quite strange.
There's this thing of like, he falls into what I consider to be quite a stereotypical role for a Japanese guy in one of these movies, where he is very sort of like reserved and softly spoken, and like, thinking about almost the spirituality of it all. It's like, that's not bad. I think he does a good job as an actor, and I'm sure like he took the role wanting to do that. But there's a bit where Godzilla turns up at this airport, and then it cuts back to them on the military ship with the US Army, and they're talking to the Monarch people, and between them, there is no real visceral reaction to Godzilla at all. Like they've already reacted to the MUTOs, but the fact that like Godzilla shows up and this is the first time he's ever been seen in the modern world, and nobody really reacts to him in any big way. You think that the military guys would be saying to the Monarch scientists like, "Are you kidding? Like, you kept the MUTO a secret for decades, and you also knew about this fucking Godzilla thing. Like, you'd be furious. You get some hothead US Army guy, because the guy they've got in charge of the army in like the movie, the actor's like fine, but again, given nothing real to do, I think he'd be fuming, like really angry that there's not enough. Like, Monarch kept this secret, like should be an enormous point of conflict in the film, and it isn't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I suppose the lack of a reaction from anyone in Monarch is because they're already familiar with it. But yeah, you're right about was it Admiral Stenz?
Yeah, and it extends to the rest of the cast as well. Like even Ford Brody, he's nonplussed about Godzilla really. Yeah, there's a little bit of screaming at the airport, but you would think that Godzilla was pretty much a known entity.
I mean, yeah, if you think of like Cloverfield, whatever you make of it, their reactions are much more real.
And they just announced they're making another Cloverfield, a direct sequel to that first found footage movie recently.
As long as they just ignore Cloverfield Paradox, we're all good.
I don't particularly like Cloverfield, and I haven't seen either of the sequels, but I'm sure it's on the Monster Island radar, shall we say.
Absolutely. I mean, 10 Cloverfield Lane is definitely worth a watch. Paradox, I don't remember anything. I remember the first scene, then that's it. And I'm not even kidding. I remember nothing.
Fell asleep or something.
I think my eyes were open, but my brain was asleep.
The whole Cloverfield thing of these three movies being completely disconnected and they did just slap it on after the fact is fascinating, to say the least.
You know what? That doesn't really bother me. I know we're kind of veering off topic here.
That's how they did Die Hard, isn't it? All the Die Hard movies are... They're just like these arid scripts that float around in production hell, and then they say like, let's make it a Die Hard movie, and they just throw out another one.
I'm all for that. So if you want to do that with a Godzilla movie, I'm more than down for it. Do like a horror Godzilla movie. I'm totally down for that. Yeah. So what were we saying?
Well, I was just going on and on complaining about the structural difficulties of this movie. Yeah. But I know that you actually really loved the sound design. You've said before this is your favourite Godzilla Raw. Yeah, that's it. Exactly. I mean, because there are some positives to be shared, perhaps. Yeah, maybe we should move on to positives and then come back around to the negatives. So yeah, I suppose if we're going to go to like our favourite moment, it's easily that Raw in Chinatown. It's like finding an extended version of your favourite song for me. It was fantastic, and in the cinema especially so. Like I still, even when I watch it on TV, I still get goosebumps when I hear it. And it sounds weird to for a Raw to elicit that kind of reaction, but it does, because it's something you're familiar with, but then it's just amped up, and it's like it is mind blowing. I mean, to anyone else who they probably wouldn't react that same way, but they were clearly they knew what they were doing. What is it? They call it the ASMR Godzilla. Yes, exactly. Raw. You could probably get it on YouTube. And the way they build to it's great as well, because I mean it's after the Halo drop, but that specific scene where he roars, so the sound drops, and then you just see Godzilla's silhouette in the smoke with the light flashes, and then even the music takes a different turn, and you just kind of get this like this one chord, like it's almost like Stanley Kubrick type. A little bit, yeah. Which obviously the music beforehand with the Halo drop is from 2001, right? Yeah, Requiem. Yeah. And you just get this one chord, like on a Rhodes piano or something like that. It just plays a few times. And just by that, that the way the music changes, something's coming. Yeah. So, your expectations are already sky high, really, at that point. And then lets out the loudest and longest roar he's ever made. It's just relentless. It's absolutely fucking brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it makes me tingly now. Yeah. Thinking about it. Yeah, same. It's so good. And apparently it took, I mean, this isn't news really. Anyone could find this out, but apparently it took like 6 months
to get that raw down over the course of making this movie. And they used microphones that could record sounds and frequencies outside of audible human frequencies, and then they pitched them down and distorted them to help create it. And that's just like, it's very clever, very, very clever. And this is here we go, circling back around to the negatives. This is where I feel kind of conflicted, because I think that's some of the best sound design I've ever heard, but then there's some parts which I feel were just like completely missed the mark. So I've got really mixed feelings about it. So that bit when Ford is on that railway bridge.
Yeah, and you spoke about this specifically on our King of Monsters discussion, didn't you? There's like they use like a creaking chair.
Yeah.
And to you, it's not disguised well enough. Like it's supposed to be like giant pieces of wood and metal moving, but you're not fooled by it, basically.
And it just took me straight out of it, and it was so disappointing, because I remember it was you that told me that that's what it was afterwards, and I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I thought it was. It's just like, I don't know if it's like, maybe I'm being too nitpicky actually, because
I don't know. I mean, I think it's both a blessing and a curse for people who are into sound like you as much as they are, because you're going to both appreciate things on a different level, knowing how it's made, but also if you do know how something's made, that can sometimes take away some of the magic of it, because you just know like, oh, that's a chair, and they've lowered the tone and octave, and now it sounds like a bridge, but it doesn't, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that the way they did it kind of sounds, organic. Using like real things to make real sounds. It's like, that's, if you're gonna do something like that, that's the best way to do it. And so, like, making the MUTO sounds, I don't know how they did it, but it doesn't sound like a digital effect. It sounds like something that's been manipulated. It's I think they, for the most part, they were firing on all cylinders for that. It was, the sound design was just absolutely top notch, and the music as well. I really liked. It was kind of, some of it harkens back to the original Godzilla music from 1954, but without just being that music, just redone. And yeah, it was good. And as you were saying, having Requiem from 2001 in there as well. It's like it's good choices of music as well as the original score. So it's an audio visual treat.
Yeah,
really.
I think that's one of the reasons that makes it a frustrating movie more than an outright bad movie, because the parts that are good are so good, they just feel like they should be a prelude to something more.
Yes.
And maybe they're sequels, that's what it leads on to. It's like, well, no, the movie should stand on its own, I think. And yeah, it's a shame, because I think the Halo drop is the best part of the film, and as you said, it leads into that very haunting use of different music, and then the raw, all that's like one contained sequence effectively.
Yeah.
And maybe if they'd held the Halo drop back from the trailer, that would have had more impact in the cinema, but
potentially.
It's
it's lots of really great pieces of cinema, like really, really good pieces of cinema that just gets bogged down by teases and uninteresting characters and covering of fight scenes. But you've got these super strong moments there, and it's like, it's kind of littered throughout, and that's what makes it so irritating. You're kind of up and down with it the whole way through. Yeah,
it would also be maybe more gratifying if, rather than having a scene with Brody and his wife at the start and then not seeing them together until the end, just show them reuniting at the end and make that the whole journey of the movie, or something like that.
Right, not having the bit at the start.
Potentially. I just think there's a way like they could have moved the pieces around, because you do wait so long to see Godzilla, and it's so fleeting. It's just like, well, seeing little snippets of him like in the smoke as they dropped at the very beginning of the movie, and then not seeing him again for like half an hour, and then seeing a little bit more with a roar, and then cut away again, like that would have actually built momentum into the climax. Albeit like that climax would still need to be a decent fight scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think peppering it out throughout the movie, as is the way with Jaws and Alien and other films that try this, rather than it being like, well, for hour one of the film, basically nothing other than like a MUTO, who is not who we've gone to see, and then they're too sparing with it throughout the rest of it. But
I think how it works with Jaws and Alien and stuff like that is they are hard to find, creatures that are kind of picking off people, whereas Godzilla, he's not as subtle,
Godzilla
is he?
Is like a building.
So like it doesn't work for that. like for a monster of that size, well, 3 monsters, essentially.
There's that bit in Las Vegas where they go to find the female MUTO and they think it's going to be like in that little room, and then it cuts to the mountain outside and it's already like blown to pieces.
Didn't notice the giant hole in the mountain.
Yeah, I love that Las Vegas bit, but it's so dumb.
It's so silly.
And that's the thing, actually, is like Godzilla kind of is a bit silly, and I think that the Legendary movies as a whole have done a fairly good job of making it look realistic in terms of the appearance of the atmospherics and all the like debris and stuff that they've done, and there's lots of atmosphere in King of Monsters, which looks great. Grounding it in that way is good, but grounding it at a script level, it hurts the film, I think, is the ultimate takeaway.
Yeah.
It becomes a bit emotionless and too empty. I want some more anger. I want some more like, I need to get back to my wife and she could be dead, and you know, that not knowing what each other is. Like, there's even a scene where Forward Brody calls Elle and she doesn't pick up because she's bathing the kid. It's like, fair enough. But if your husband was missing and there's 3 kaijus out there, you'd have your phone on you like all the time. I think the kid's bath would probably come second to like making sure you don't miss that call. So there's things about it where it just feels like there isn't enough emotion there, which is interesting, to be honest, because when Gareth Edwards did Star Wars Rogue One, which I doubt you've seen, but
I've not seen it.
It gets a lot of criticism for the exact same thing, where the action is extremely strong. In my opinion, it's got the best Star Wars action out of any of the Star Wars movies. It's really satisfying viewing. But the characters, the humans in it, you know, actors try as they may, they haven't got anything ready to do.
Yeah, I mean, so can we fault Gareth Edwards for that? Because he knows what he's doing, directing-wise, but does it come down to the writing?
Yeah, he doesn't write these movies, so that's fair, absolutely. But then there's a correlation, you know, just between these two things.
It tends to be any film he does. That seems to be a common complaint.
I've not seen Monster, to be fair, which I know is his big like breakout thing.
Yeah, I've not seen it either. I should have. I was meant to watch it when it came out, but just never got around to it.
I think if you do a Godzilla and then you do a Star Wars, and they're both good and bad for identical reasons, there's
it's
a little
safe to assume.
Yeah. And I like his style because, like, honestly, like the action that he does is great. It's just like, yeah, it's not supported by an emotional human element. So this is a different thing, I think. We always complain about the humans in these Godzilla movies, but normally it's because they're annoying or time wasting or something like that. But in this movie, it feels like it's just like they're just like not even like emoting.
Yeah, exactly. They flatline completely. Yeah, it's a shame because any of the Godzilla parts, any monster parts, I think are just top notch. The bits that you see, it's just you know there's something there. You're just not getting to see it. It's a frustrating watch, and I think I'm complaining more than I would have if I'd only seen this a couple of times back when it came out. But yeah, under the harsh light of day, I can scrutinize it a lot more than I would have before, which is probably not fair.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's fair enough, really. Like, maybe it has suffered a little bit from having its sequel come out, and King of Monsters does have some of the same problems, but there is undoubtedly more monster in it. So, and King of Monsters does go more in that kind of pseudo science fiction, comic booky direction, where it's like, okay, we've got some weird technology that's kind of from the future, but it's modern day, and it's a bit more pulpy and silly, and you know, it makes you feel like your time with the humans is a little better spent, I think. I know when we discussed King of Monsters, you were more annoyed by the people in that movie than I was on that occasion, which is rare, I think, because usually I'm the one who hates human beings. I don't know. I wouldn't say it's unfair criticism, honestly, at all.
So what did you make of the MUTOs? You know, they were created specifically for this movie, you know, American-made kaijus, essentially. What do you make of them?
I actually think the movie should take a lot of credit for hiding them from any of the promotional materials, because we didn't know they were going to be in the movie at all. So that was like a really nice surprise. And this actually goes back to what you're saying about, is it fair criticism? In fairness, the first time you watch it, when you don't know a MUTO is going to be there and then it's revealed, that's very meaty as a viewer. On a rewatch, when you do know it's going to be there, maybe less so.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, the MUTOs themselves, I think, really cool, actually. And I don't like this sort of like wormy spider sort of there's a design kind of approach that's been going on in movies since Cloverfield, really, of the monsters being sort of like knuckle-driven, kind of very kind of alien-like creatures, but don't have like any particular character. You see a lot in Cloverfield and other J.J. Abrams movies.
Yeah, because I was thinking like, you know, to look at, I think they're actually, to be honest, I think they're quite unexciting to look at. Like just giant grey functional bugs. It's not bad by any means. So they're certainly menacing looking, but it leans on that sort of Cloverfieldy, Auger-esque design, like that we spoke about before in Godzilla 2000. You know, and it's like even the naming is sort of similar. It's like, you know, like Auger, for example, it's a contraction of organizer.
Organizer,
Organizer, G1, yeah. And, you know, MUTO is an acronym for massive unidentified terrestrial organism. You know, it's like it's that same vein.
I liked it though as well. I think it actually rides. It's on the right side of the line, is what I was going to say.
I didn't think you'd think that.
I think they've grown on me a little bit over the years, actually.
Okay.
I like the way that the male is smaller than the female, so there's like that interest. And the scene where the MUTO does the dive bomb into the water through the naval ships in San Francisco is one of the best shots in the movie too. So I agree. Like visually, you know, their design is a little bit too Cloverfield-ish, but it's the way they're used in the fight. You know, what is there is actually very cool, I think. So overall, I like them, I think, you know, and the reveal was good, but I'm guessing you're a little cooler on them given what you just said. Yeah,
basically. It's just because I think visually quite unappealing. I suppose I was expecting something a bit more colourful. You know, something that actually you could kind of tell what it was. But with this, it's kind of, they looked a bit like, the faces looked a bit like the Starship Troopers bugs. But with wings and spider legs. And I was like, but the Starship Troopers bugs were like yellow and black from what I remember, and like really striking looking, whereas this is just like a desaturated version. I found that slightly disappointing. God, I'm really negative on this, aren't I? This is the thing, like I actually do enjoy this film. Oh man, I need to pull it back a bit here. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a little disappointing because this is where King of the Monsters I thought was really good because it was colourful for a start, you know, and maybe it's just I'm easily pleased by bright colours. I don't know.
I mean, I know this isn't something you're a fan of either, but like Avengers Endgame, which has this massive final battle scene in it, which is very satisfying because you finally get to see everybody clash at the end of this like 24 movie thing. Very exciting. But on a rewatch, I dislike how grey and brown and bland it looks. It's just like, what, we got like Captain America and Spider-Man here, and it's just like grey. Like, come on. Yeah. So I think that's a part of when you ground something too much. It's like, it comes up with the overall aesthetic of the movie. I think that they're gonna be hidden in dust and debris and stuff.
Yeah,
so,
but you know, maybe I'm being too harsh because if we think about it, I mean, all eyes were on this film after Godzilla 98. True. So they needed to take a more grounded approach, and so I don't know why I'm giving them flack for doing that. Really, because you know,
maybe we disagree then.
Yeah, I think they needed to keep it a bit more real looking, and I suppose a giant grey bug is more realistic than a giant yellow, black and pink bug or something.
A giant three-headed dragon.
Yeah, exactly. You know, because for a lot of people, this would be probably the first Godzilla film they've ever seen, and they'd be like, okay, so there's Godzilla. Why is he fighting a giant pink bug? Like, you know, but if you have something that's like a little less descript, it feels more like a parasite that he's fighting. You know, like a piece of nature that he's fighting. So you know, it makes sense in that respect.
And as a reveal as well, like it being secret and not being included in marketing, if it had been kept under wraps and then there was a giant pink bug, surprise, I think that would have had a very adverse effect from audiences.
Yeah, I think so too.
But that's not to say that the female MUTO has that like orange belly full of those radioactive eggs, so there is like colour there, and maybe they could have like they tiptoe a little bit into even the flame breath, the atomic breath from Godzilla. So I feel like there is kind of like first movie syndrome where if Godzilla were to fight the MUTOs if it was, you know, deeper into a series, you probably would have seen them be a bit braver with colour and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess it suffers a little bit from hiding away from the silliness of Godzilla 98.
But then it has to.
Yeah, but then also my overall criticism was that yes, it's grounded, but that doesn't mean it needs to be dull.
What do you think of Godzilla's redesign?
I quite like it, actually. I think it's a decent mix of like the somewhat stubby Godzilla that occasionally popped up in some of the Japanese stuff, but he's also been sort of adapted so that he is more easily animated in CG. So you do get a lot of the remnants of him in the costume Godzilla is still there, I think, but they've changed it enough that we can move this guy and have him be a bit more athletic. So I think it looks good.
Yeah, I absolutely love the design. They took into consideration the fact that he's amphibian, so they're giving him gills. Quite a lot of the Japanese audience thought he was too fat.
Yeah.
And it's like,
but
well,
he's been out of action for a long time.
Exactly. I mean, but the thing is, he's huge and he needs something to support him, so he's gonna be stocky.
Yeah,
it just makes sense, and I mean, really,
plus
really like
the costume Godzilla has a real pot belly on him.
Yeah, that's why I found the criticism so strange. Maybe it's a mistranslation. Maybe they meant like he's just too. Maybe bulky. They just meant too stocky. Yeah, exactly.
But then by King of the Monsters, he looks a bit more trimmed down a little bit. He's a bit more beefy, like he's more muscle than blubber.
Yeah.
He's been in that underground temple and just like lifting pyramids and stuff.
This is well, until the Netflix Godzilla movies, this is the biggest incarnation of Godzilla as well.
And we'll get to that at some point, I'm sure. Yeah,
we will do. So yeah, I mean, this one's, I think it's like 300 feet, 350 feet, something like that. And for me, I think the bigger the better, because I like seeing Godzilla as like an unstoppable force. So, that makes any threats that he faces that can actually take him on seem that much more threatening. And then like you really feel his like size and presence when like he's on the Golden Gate Bridge and he grabs the railing there. And I was just like, seeing him being that big is just it's a real treat for me. And obviously you can't have a disaster movie without kids being trapped on a bus on a bridge. So
I love how Elizabeth Olsen puts her son on the bus with her like colleague, the black-haired lady, and she's like, "I'll look after him, don't worry." She's never seen again.
She's not.
During all that bus drama, you hear her voice like once off screen. Clearly they couldn't get the actor back. So I wonder if all of that bridge stuff was like inserted later because they were like, "Oh, we need some more Godzilla." Or maybe the Godzilla went through the bridge but the kid wasn't involved or something. I don't know.
Maybe.
But clearly she wasn't there when they shot that stuff.
Did feel a bit tacked on.
A lot of this feels like they moved it around. I mentioned earlier with Bryan Cranston, hitting stardom at the same time. It felt like they kind of did move some stuff around.
Yeah.
So who can say? If they want to do like a MonsterVerse thing and have Bryan Cranston be in prequel movies, they kind of could. Because
there's 15 years of
exactly
missing, basically.
It would be stupid, but he never says that he hasn't had like previous adventures. Kind of thing,
exactly. So overall, I guess despite everything I was saying, my usual kind of negging on it kind of way, I do think it was a strong Godzilla film. As we normally say, it's like could a newcomer come into this, and that's often what I'm looking for. And I think absolutely, and I think for the majority, as I said, for the majority of the audience, this was their first Godzilla film if they hadn't seen 1998. And I think it's having, like I was saying, having something a bit more grounded to kind of hook people back into Godzilla after 1998. I think this was the way to do it. And and something that it really deserves credit for is making Godzilla a sympathetic force of nature again that you don't want to annoy, because like they did it right by setting up the MUTOs as the bad guy. They killed Joe's wife at the start. It wasn't Godzilla that did that. This kind of setting up Godzilla as the savior, as the hero. Like, even though he blunders through and destroys buildings, you don't think at any point that he's the bad guy. And that's absolutely what you wanted right out of the gate for this, and they nailed that. So I think this is a great first Godzilla film for anyone who's even remotely interested in Godzilla, or even if they're not, it's still, I think, a pretty good film to watch.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think as a first film, it absolutely serves its audience, even though it does have frustrating elements. And I think the more invested in Godzilla you are, the more frustrating that stuff can be. But I know a lot of people like it. It's experimental. It tries something different. It distances itself very nicely from the 98 movie. So although I think that it could be a lot better, it does its job, and obviously it's helped to establish like these sequels coming out, so it's far from a failure. I think it's just that on repeat viewings, things that irritated us will irritate us more as time goes on.
Yeah.
But as we've also said, the parts of it which are good are contenders for like best Godzilla moments ever. Still,
easily.
So when we do these podcasts, it's always kind of nitpicky, and we like to get down in the dirt about why we like or dislike a movie. That's not to say that we unanimously hate it or love it either. It's just like we like to make it complicated. But if you were to recommend it, like I would recommend it. I absolutely would. I think it's a good movie. Like, yeah, fine. Like, if you want to have a good Godzilla movie, then this is one of the best choices.
Yeah. No. Okay. Good. This isn't the only thing that was related to this film, because there was also a comic, Godzilla Awakening.
When you put your Blu-ray in, it tells you about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It pops up on the screen like, why don't you check out the Godzilla Awakening comic book? And I was like, Ben's going to tell me about it, so I don't need to. So I'm listening.
So I have had it for quite a long time, but I never read it. I don't know why. I have it on my shelf, and I just never got around to it until last night. And so I'll just kind of wrap up the story a bit just to clue you in. So it starts off in the 80s with Serizawa talking to his father, Eiji, who I think is a reference to the special effects guy for the 1954 film. Could be wrong. But I mean, Ishiro Serizawa is, a reference to Ishiro Honda, the director of 54, and Dr. Serizawa from 54 as well. So it makes sense.
Then,
yeah. So he's telling Ishiro about his job working for Monarch during its formation, and then we flash back to 1945, and we see Eiji spots a flying monster after the first bomb drops on Hiroshima, and then he ends up joining Monarch, who examine evidence of MUTOs and discover that the flying creature is a radioactive superorganism, and they call it Shinamura, which means death swarm of death, I think it was, and it can self-replicate and all this. And while tracking Shinamura, Eiji hears from witnesses about another creature, Godzilla, chasing it off. And similarly to the movie, we have Eiji trying to convince the army that Godzilla's there to maintain balance, and that he's not the bad guy. He's trying to keep the other bad guys at bay. But then the army decided to take action, and that they see both Godzilla and Shinamura heading towards Bikini Atoll, and then nuke them both there. So that montage footage you see at the start of the movie is actually it's bombing both Godzilla and the Shinamura. But obviously,
so the Shinamura is not a MUTO or anything like that. It's a different thing.
It is a MUTO technically. Okay. Yeah, it's like a giant flying xenomorph, basically, and it's made up of millions of cells. So if part of it breaks off, it could self-replicate and build itself back up again. So the only way to get rid of it is to completely annihilate it. So yeah, they take it out, and then we flash forward back to Ishiro Serizawa at his father's funeral, and he's then approached by Monarch to join, and then the rest is history. So I mean, overall it was a fun read, and it did add a bit more depth to the lore of the MonsterVerse. But I did notice it kind of contradicted itself a little bit, because in the movie, Serizawa said that the USS Nautilus is what awoke Godzilla, but we see in this that Godzilla had already been active for several years, chasing this Shinamura. So when they sent the Nautilus down in the comic, it did grab its attention, but it certainly wasn't what awakened him. And I mean, normally I'd chalk that up to a miscommunication between publishers and movie producers. Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, the guy that wrote this comic is the guy that did the screenplay for the movie. So that seemed like a bit of an oversight. I mean, this guy that did the screenplay, he wasn't the final writer. He was the final writer of like 3 or 4 different people. So maybe it's just, it might just have been a bit of an oversight on his part. But I'm a bit picky when it comes to that kind of thing, because I don't know. I read a lot of DC comics, and there's a lot of
inconsistencies.
A lot of inconsistencies, and I tend to pick up on these things. It's an annoying habit of mine. So I noticed that, and it's just a little bit disappointing, because I really wanted it to, be one and the same, but it felt a little bit like they kind of didn't care that much. only a little bit, because I wanted them to, treat it, on the same level, really. Because I'm such a comics fan. Like, catering to me with Godzilla comics is great, and if it ties into the movies, that's just awesome. But if they kind of like slack a bit on this, I'm like, well, is this just a cynical cash grab, or is this actually something that's going to add to it? I do feel like it adds to it more than it takes away, so yeah, it might be a bit cash grabby, but I do feel like it added to it, and it was a worthwhile read. It wasn't bogged down with fluff, and it expanded on the origins and things like that. So it's it's good. I enjoyed it, but yeah,
I can see why it would be annoying with those kind of inconsistencies, because the connections are the entire point of an interconnected universe, and when the connections don't quite work, it becomes annoying. So
yeah,
I don't think you're out of step with anybody for finding that a bit of an irritation. But then it's early days as well. The bigger these things get, the more of those will inevitably crop up. But then also it's like you have to have some concession with it, like, oh, you're trying to make a huge, big interconnected story. Inevitably there's going to be some like details that get shifted left or right.
Yeah.
Which is just like part of it, I suppose.
Could rationalize it away and say that Serizawa just kind of forgot to mention it. So like,
I think he's just spouting some monarch, misinformation nonsense.
That's probably it, actually. You know what? That's probably it. There we go. You've rationalized it for me. I'm happy with that.
I've been a long-term MCU fan, so rationalizing little bits of bullshit like that is one of my skills.
I was expecting. I wasn't really expecting much. I spoke to you last night. I said I really wasn't expecting anything from it, because for Wonder Woman 84 there was a tie-in, a prequel tie-in, and it was honestly, it's a waste of money. The thing is, like, the stories weren't bad, but it didn't add anything to the movie. Did nothing. If that should have been a free promotional thing, like it would get Wonder Woman fans, fans of the movies reading comics, and and vice versa. So, but anyway, that's my complaints about the Wonder Woman 84 comic tie-in.
How was the artwork and that kind of angle on the book?
Artwork was
the Godzilla book, of course.
The Godzilla book was hit and miss, because the Godzilla looked great, really, really, really good. But when it came to seeing Eiji Serizawa, there were points in it where he looked like a blonde Western white man. Huh. And then in the next panel, he'd be back to being, dark-haired Japanese man. And I was like, is this the same person? I was genuinely confused. I'll show you. I'll send you a screenshot later. But yeah, it was really jarring, and I was like, that was frustrating. There's just little bits like that. Put it on the
Instagram on the.
Yeah, I think I will, so everyone knows what I'm talking about. But I mean, it's definitely worth a read. It doesn't take long. It's not too wordy, which is nice, because I just read Batman White Knight, and I sent you a photo of that, and just one page was like reading Silmarillion. So
I was trying to read Nausicaa, which is a famous Studio Ghibli movie. It was a manga before it was a film. And it may as well just be a novel, honestly. Like, you struggle to see the little people between the bloody words. There's so much fucking text in there. But yeah, this is a separate discussion.
Yeah. So the guy that wrote, damn it, I've forgotten his name. He's definitely, you can tell he's a screenwriter, because he's right, and I think that translates well to comics. Because you're also letting the pictures tell the words, unlike a novelist who doesn't trust the pictures. They're only trusting the words they're writing down. So yeah, he's definitely got a flair for it. So happy to see him do another one, to be honest. But yeah, it was good. Definitely worth the read. So yeah, I guess that kind of wraps it up. Anything you want to add, Graham?
Just that at some point we will do a podcast where we unanimously love a movie, despite us finding things to complain about. And yeah, I mean, for everything we've said, like, yeah, Godzilla 2014 is pretty solid. The effects are fantastic. The actors, while given not much to do, are very good, very well. They do sort of enrich the content a little bit. So yeah, don't think it's a bad film or anything. Like, it is actually really worth a watch. And if you're, if it's kicked off an entire franchise, then I don't think, you can be down on it too much.
Yeah.
I'd actually be open to seeing Gareth Edwards do another one, actually. If they said to him, here's a little bit of a bigger budget, go nuts with the action this time, don't hold back, that would be lovely, because I think he's capable of that.
He was down to do another 2, I think, but then Star Wars popped up, and then I think he was spending his time on that, so maybe we will see him again soon.
Maybe.
Who knows? Yeah. Okay, so thank you for listening, everyone. Actually, before that, where can they find you, Graham, on the old internet?
Oh no! If you like retro video games that have little to nothing to do with Godzilla, you can watch Fossil Arcade on YouTube. Maybe I'll do a Godzilla game at some point. I keep saying I will, but I haven't so far. So
there's time.
If you like games, and it's there, Fossil Arcade.
And if you want to hear us complaining about things we love, also listen to the Fossil Arcade podcast. So for me, you can find me at Ben MR Hall for my drawings and stuff on Instagram or on Twitter, and it's at Monster Island Radio on Instagram for this podcast, and on Twitter it's Monster Island RP. So yeah, get in touch with us there if you want to talk about anything Godzilla or anything at all. Why not? So yeah, until the next one, everyone. Bye.
See ya.